yeah, we are going to jump into our recap. And we do cut this recap out, and I will be doing it for this episode as well. So if you happen to find yourself just on our recap video and you want to hear more of our full discussion, that will typically be linked in the description. And it will be for this episode as well, but this episode will not have a proper discussion since Blake is not here. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's get into it. This was episode 84 of Campaign 3, Red Rural Revelations. That's a tongue twister. So, okay. The episode picks up with our crew, if you recall, having basically just been discovered by one of these podling type humanoids on Ruidus, that they went to this little farming village where these other types of creatures besides the Raylorans existed. So they decided to get a closer look, went down, and were transforming out of their mist form back into human form when one of these creatures discovers them in this shack. The creature asks what's happening and does so in the common language. And what happens next is basically this scene of the party and this creature trying to figure out if they can trust one another, basically, because the impression we get is that clearly the Imperium and the Rylorans are kind of in charge and overseeing this little farming town. And this podling creature is, clearly scared of going against them. So when the party asks, are you with the Imperium? The creature is like, yes. Is this a test? Excuse me. So this kind of goes back and forth with them being like, no, we're not testing you. We are also against the Imperium. We're here to help. But Imogen ultimately casts Detect Thoughts to kind of get the true thoughts of this creature, right? And can tell that it is scared and it is not friends with the Imperium necessarily. So they eventually kind of get through that chaos and do determine that they can kind of trust one another. And we learn a lot here. They basically ask this creature a lot of questions. We do find out that they are called boroto, that is the name of their race. And this one specifically is called Dono. And they have two sets of hands. So kind of a normal set that you would think of, but then they have a smaller set that kind of is up on their chest for more delicate tasks, I guess. We also come to find out that there's a little lizard-like creature that crawls out from under its robe called a Psycha. And they have a symbiotic relationship with one another. So they're finding all these things out. They basically ask how Dono can speak common. And Dono says he can due to seeing people's dreams. These creatures, instead of dreaming themselves, they get to peek in on Exandrian's dreams. So that's how they picked up on the language. And Fern wants to know, how do you know that, that's what you're seeing, that you're seeing Exandrian dreams? And Dono says that it's because that's what the Weave Mind has always told them. And the Weave Mind, we find out, is basically the leader of the Imperium. They're this collection of Rylora, seemingly. They also find out that the name of this town that they're in is Razora. So they continue asking him a lot of questions, but Dono ultimately points them towards the village elder, who will be better suited to answer their questions and stuff. So the party transforms back into the mist so that they can travel stealthily toward the elder's house, and Dono leads the way. So they arrive at the elder's house. He opens the door. Dono kind of speaks to him, and the elder hits him with his stick and then welcomes him in. And so then the party floats in behind. They close the door, the party transforms back into their real forms, and kind of introductions are made. We find out that the elder's name is Barthy, and to prove that Bell's Hells is not with the Imperium and this isn't a test, Orm actually pulls out the Rayloran Juggernaut's head from the bag of holding. And so the elder's okay, yeah, I believe you. So the elder then asks hey, what can I do for you? And they're just looking for information, more information about their lives, what's going on here on Ruidus, basically just anything. So what follows next is basically just a series of questions going back and forth, right? So the first thing they ask is basically, how long has the Imperium controlled this area? And they say it's been about 500 years. And then they ask, well, how long are your lifespans? And Barthy says that he stopped counting after 300 years. So their lifespans are a while, but we don't know exactly how old Barthy is. And so they ask, were you here when Ruidus was created? And Barthy says that no, but he like as long as he's been here, Ruidus has been here. So like he wasn't there the day, it got extracted from Exandria or anything. Um he then asks or excuse me, Bell's Hells then ask, like, are there histories of this place? Like, is there anywhere we could find out this information? And he says that they used to have entire written histories, but they were all destroyed by the Weave Mind. So then the party asks about gods and religion, and Barty says that they used to view Exandria as the afterlife, and that was kind of their religious indoctrination. But with the dreamers coming here, so people like Bell's Hells and people that are coming through the Bloody Bridge, he says that people are now having a crisis of faith about that. So the party then asks about the Weave Mind, and they're told, it's a group of Raylorans who act as essentially a conduit to the one who sleeps and then tells other people what to do. They're also the ones that like seemingly control the flares that happen. They find out that the one who sleeps is also known as the Beating Heart and the Dream Catcher, and one other name that they're not allowed to say, but this is heavily implied and basically confirmed to be Predathos. So then the group asks, like, what's the relationship between you guys and the Raylorans? And Barthy says that, some of them are nice. They're just people, like we are. But some are, hands of the Weave Mind. They're doing, I don't know if military is necessarily the right word, but they're just, following orders, and that's who they serve. So, just like people, some are good, some are bad. But the Raylorans have existed here on Ruidus for as long as the Boromoto have. So it's not as if they just like showed up one day. Chet then asks, are there even more races besides Raylorn and Boromoto here? And Barthy says, yeah, there's a lot more, but most of them are underneath Ruidus and a part of the fungal network here. So then the party asks about this, and they find out that most of the entrances to this underground network are found in the capital city. There aren't any nearby, but there used to be. So then Barthy, asks if he can ask them any questions, and the first thing he asks is if they can describe what a pastry tastes like, because he thinks they look so good from the dreams that he's seen, and the party actually has some, so they share some with him. However, before he's about to eat it, his Saita comes out and steals it, and we find out her name is Chu, and she does end up sharing some with him, but she is very distrustful of the party, having been listening to everything this whole time, and she wants to know like what their plan is here. And the party says that they just, plan to go to the capital city. They're just here to find out more about everything, find out more about who's running the show over here, what their plans are, and all that jazz. Because there are bad people here, but there are also bad people on Exandria. And so Bell's Hells is here to stop all of the bad people. The group then asks, what would happen if Predathos were to wake up? And Barthy isn't sure. So then they ask, how far is the capital city, which is Kaviris? And they're told it's about a 4-day travel. And Barthy goes on to say that, things have been kind of rough around here. So the Imperium sent what's called a will master to set things straight. Also colloquially known as the Will. And this is basically just a high-ranking military member. But Barthy also says that he has a friend that might be coming through the town soon as part of a caravan. Their name is Zesh, and they are Rayloran. And they actually work with the Volition, which is like a rebel group that is against the Imperium. And this caravan should be coming through any day now. So perhaps, if they could get in contact with Zesh, Zesh might be able to tell them more or help them out. So the party then, conjure a minor illusion of lewdness to see if Barthy recognizes him. And he does, but it's been a very long time since he's come through. They then do the same thing with the Nightmare King, Ira, but Barthy does not recognize him. I think Chet then asks what this town is used for, like why the Raylorans have occupied it, and they're basically there to just supply them with what they need. They have a lot of livestock here, like those buffalo creatures from the last episode. So it's basically just a supply town for them. So then the party asks if he could describe Zesh so that they could perhaps send a message to her. And Barthy tries, but it's not doing the best job because Zesh is a Rayloran. So then they ask if there's any like object of Zesh's that they could use to build a connection. And Barthy goes and gets this piece of glass. because we find out that Zesh is known as a glass shaper, which apparently is a very important like role in society here. So they grab that, and meanwhile, Fern asks why the Weave Mind does the flares, and Barthy doesn't know why they do them, but when they happen, what happens here is there's like this blinding flash of red light, and they're all forced into a dream together. And when this happens, it feels really good. Like everything else is stripped away, and they just feel connected with each other. Barthy then asks if the group has been to Taste of Taldore because he's also seen that in his dreams, and the party gives him some of their souvenirs from there, and he's very excited about that. The party then just kind of discusses for a bit like what their next move should be, and they actually realize that the caravan that Zesh may be with is arriving to town right now. So Imogen tries to message Zesh, excuse me, with the glass, and is successful, and basically says, "Hey, we're here with Elder Barthy, and we'd like to talk to you." Zesh responds saying that like, "I don't know who you are, but like I'm just here to conduct some business." And basically at the same time, there is a knock on the door. So Barthy goes to open the door, and it's a Ryloran, the Will Master specifically. So the party is like trying to transform into their mist, but realize they don't really have enough time, and so they don't, and instead try to hide. Except for Imogen. Imogen decides she's going to just keep going and try to transform into the mist. But the group rolls really poorly on their stealth checks, and basically the Willmaster realizes that like something is up here. So she's pissed. There are some more Ray Lawrence and then some Ruby Vanguard that all kind of like rush up, and we basically roll initiative. So as always, just gonna kind of skim through the highlights of the combat. And things kick off with Laudna casting a fireball, basically hitting all of the bad guys and just, setting things right off. One of the Vanguard soldiers at this point, like, actually kind of bursts into this purple energy, and we're told that they like are becoming exalted, and Imogen and Fern can like immediately feel their presence and the pull of them. They then cast telekinesis on Laudna and like pull them toward her. Meanwhile, combat is going on. Basically, everyone is trying to focus the Will Master, mostly, and they're actually starting to look a little bit rough. So their eyes flare up, and then several nearby townsfolk basically all kind of get possessed and start like rushing toward the fight to aid her. Excuse me. So meanwhile, they're trying to get like the Will Master brought inside to like not only kind of get the commotion out of the open, but also kind of get her more cornered, better position for them, right? So Fern, to do this, casts Charm Person on her and is successful, but fails kind of the deception check to convince her to come inside. So combat continues, and again, unfortunately, this entire combat for Imogen, she is just transforming into mist. Each of her turns is requiring her to just do that. So Laura's having a rough time. As it continues, we find out one of the Willmaster's abilities is Meat Shield, which, due to these farmers that she possessed, sometimes when attacks are meant for her, they will instead go to the villagers as they kind of are like jumping in front of her, basically. So the party, because of this, basically starts doing non-lethal damage so that they don't accidentally, take out any of these villagers. So that's happening. Villagers are falling over left and right. But eventually Ashton does get a final hit on the Willmaster, also non-lethal damage, and knocks them out unconscious. Around the same point, Imogen does finally get into her full mist form, but then that ends her turn, and combat continues as Bell's Hells try to pick off the rest of the Ruby Vanguard members, two of which are Shrikes, which is like a certain class of Ray Lauren. So these two Shrikes are like beating up on Orem pretty badly, but when the Willmaster goes down, they rush over, pick her up, and basically try to retreat. And basically all of the Vanguard members try to retreat at this point because it's looking pretty rough. Simultaneously, a bunch of the livestock like break out of their pen, and it's basically just absolute chaos. We've got like a mini stampede happening during this combat. So Bell's Hells members are trying to pick off these people that are fleeing. They do manage to take out the two Shrikes that had grabbed up the Willmaster, and basically managed to pick off the rest of the Vanguard members that were fleeing as well. So Imogen has flown up in her mist form at this point and can basically survey all of the chaos going on in this small town right now. And can also see that, a little bit in the distance, people seem to be gathering up to come like investigate what the hell is going on. So Bell's Hells are like, what do we do? And they quickly kind of corral all of everything back into the elder's hut and put all of the bodies into the portable hole and are just trying to plan their next move. And that is basically where the episode ends. I believe they do see that, or Matt describes that there are like shapes coming toward them at the very end. But that is where episode 84 ends. Again, it is called Red Rural Revelations. So thank you for tuning in. And again, under normal circumstances, there will be a link to our full discussion down below. And there will be a link to that if you're on just the recap, but it's just going to be a couple of quick thoughts from me.